Welcome to The Market That Moves America, a podcast from the National Center for the Middle Market. The center is the leading source of knowledge, leadership, and innovative research on the middle market economy. Throughout our podcast, we will feature middle market leaders and stakeholders to hear their real-world perspectives on trends and emerging issues.
For the past 13 years, the National Center for the Middle Market has been at the forefront of researching the U.S. middle market, the companies defined as having annual revenues between $10 million and $1 billion. But recently, through our relationship with Visa, a more specific focus on emerging middle market companies has evolved. These companies at the lower end, or $10 million to $50 million in annual revenue, represent 80% of the middle market space and have specific and unique needs relevant to their larger peers. In today's episode, I'll talk to two experts who discussed the implications of the latest report on the emerging middle market and what companies can do to help advance their digital strategy. Welcome to The Market That Moves America. My name is Doug Farron, Managing Director of the National Center for the Middle Market, located at the Ohio State University Fisher College of Business. Very excited about today's episode. We're going to be talking about a very important segment of the middle market, which is the emerging middle market, those companies with revenues between $10 million and $50 million. And joining me today are Edward Galvin from Visa Commercial Solutions and Andrew Jamison from Xtend. Welcome, Edward and Andrew.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you, Doug. Good to be here.
So first off, I'd like for you each to do a little bit of introduction to the audience. I'm going to start with Andrew. Andrew, can you tell us a little bit about your background and your current role with Xtend, and maybe a little bit about Xtend?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, my background is straddling all the different segments. Insofar as I started my career working alongside SAP for the best part of 10 years. So got to see really what the enterprise segment looks like at its very finest. And really just learned a lot about payments and the broader accounting functions that sit within that fairly giant application. I then went and transitioned to work in the credit card space. And so I worked there for the best part of 12 years, really sort of focusing again on the digitization of payments and really thinking about, in today's digital era, how do we start to move transactions away from paper checks, away from ineffective and sort of really process-intensive platforms to really more digital means. And that sort of then takes me in the last 8 years, where I went and founded Xtend along with two other of my co-founders, really focused on transforming that middle market and that emerging middle market segment, their ability to access some of these digital rails like virtual credit cards, and really helping with the automation and thinking about how we could simplify the workflows for those companies, really with a consumer-grade technology that had been lacking in that sort of business segment. So that's a little bit about my background. In terms of what we do at Xtend, it really is about bringing spend management and really helping companies drive efficiencies and cost savings, but also make better use of their working capital by helping them essentially make settlements easier, whether it's to do with travel or whether it's to do with their other expenses, whether it's to do with subscriptions or shipping costs, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a little bit about my background.
Wonderful. Thanks, Andrew. And Edward, do you mind sharing a little bit about your background and your current role with Visa?
Sure, yeah. So ironically, I started my career in mid-market consulting with Deloitte in the UK. So I spent some time there. Then I went to work for a technology company called Decal in Ireland. And we're one of the premier providers of online technology to support commercial cards, expense management, if you will. And I joined Visa probably 13, 14 years ago. And I've been primarily in the B2B space, in our commercial card business and payments, and on the both sales and product side, both in the US and Europe. So today, I lead sales across our commercial business in North America for our large and middle market segment. And you introduced as as me being part of Visa Commercial Solutions. And Commercial Solutions looks at payments across large, middle market, and small business. And obviously, as we're here today, middle market is a core component of that business. And we invest accordingly in building and supporting our partners in driving digital payments in that segment.
Great. And so my first question, I'm just going to stick with you, Edward. Can you explain a little bit of the background about the partnership that exists between Visa and Xtend?
Sure. Yeah. We to Andrew's point, supporting digital payments is a core focus of ours at Visa, and we build services at Visa to help our partners. We work with our financial institutions, and we partner with third parties to continually look at how we can bring the services and solutions that the actual corporate customer wants to support their payment needs. And as we look at the segment we're speaking specifically today, the emerging middle market, we've been focusing with Xtend on how we can bring that consumer easy to use like technology that this market segment is looking for to support those needs. So we've been working with Andrew and team to look at how best we can bring technology to that customer segment as they manage their payment needs on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. And Andrew, what are some of the benefits you see partnering with the Visa team?
Look, I mean, Visa has just an enormous reach, right? Their brand obviously is preeminent in this space. And so us being able to collaborate with Visa is really about how do we best go and serve their bank partners. And that's really where this drives towards is how we collaborate to engage with those bank partners and really think about ways we can deliver these platforms and solutions in a fairly frictionless manner, not just to the banks, but ultimately to their end customers. And that's where Visa plays a really critical role.
Okay. So the National Center for the Middle Market and Visa have been working together now for a number of years, looking at different areas of the middle market. And more recently started to focus on this emerging middle market. So there's the lower end, the $10 million to $50 million revenue companies. Edward, can you tell us a little bit about why that was so important for Visa? What is the motivation behind that, or the specific focus on these emerging middle market companies?
Yeah, sure. So let me just take a step back, Doug. Like the research and the intelligence that the NCMM has been bringing to the market has really helped us accelerate better discussions with our partners, be it Andrew at Xtend or financial institutions, on where there's opportunity and where payment needs are unmet today. And as we've looked at the core middle market and the large segment of the middle market, we've been working through leveraging that intelligence over the past number of years. What's become very relevant is, there's 160,000 emerging middle market companies out there today. They have $2 trillion in purchasing power. Their needs, there's a massive shift in their needs, in their payment needs, and the needs that they have from financial institutions and technology providers. And the research in this study helps us be better informed on what the needs are, number one, how we build products and services, and how we go to market and partner with fintechs or with our financial institutions to meet some of those needs. So it's critical in helping us inform how we build product services and go to market, and that's why we leverage the research, and we look to bring the research into the ecosystem. This study in particular looks at it leverages the middle market indicator, which speaks to our interviews of over 1,000 different CEOs or C-suite executives across America on key indicators, and it's very relevant. Like, this is from 2004. This is very, very recent data to help us inform how we support the industry going forward.
What were some of the highlights for you, Edward? Were there things that surprised you or stood out from this specific research study?
So I think what continues to surprise me is just the shift in the demographics that's happening right now. Okay, so there's and just to quote the Wall Street Journal, there's a record number, approximately 4.1 million turned 65 in 2024. And this generational shift will continue through 2027, right? So we have So the next generation, this next generation has ignited a demand for digital solutions. So while our Andrew and team at Xtend and others are building digital technology, there's just such a massive shift in the user base, which creates a great new demand for services and providers and services for services and technology. So that to me it continues to be let's say a probably not surprising, but it's a continuous point that we kind of anchor in and reference as we look at some of this research.
Okay. And Andrew, through your work with middle market companies, I can just say here at the center, we look at emerging middle market and we see lots of challenges, right? So these are companies that have outgrown the kind of the small business space. They may be struggling with ways to manage rapid growth. They may be using very manual and outdated systems. So from your point of view at Xtend, what do you see as some of the challenges facing these emerging middle market companies, or maybe some of their opportunities, specifically as it relates to, you mentioned this earlier, working capital payments and so forth?
So Doug, this is kind of near and dear to my heart because I actually fall into that segment.
Right.
As a company, right? We're in that segment of 10 to 50 million in revenue, right? We essentially have a lot of the pain points laid out here. So for me, it wasn't so much what surprised me here, more the fact that actually this resonated entirely with what we deal with as a company, right? Which is we're budget constrained from year to year like any other company, but those constraints come at a point when you can't necessarily afford to invest in certain HR systems, right? Performance review platforms. And so inherently, you are going down that manual path because the limited dollars you have are still better invested in growth, right? And so, because we need to sustain this 50% year over year growth, and that's what we're doing. And so that's one aspect you look at is kind of the budgets. And then you start thinking about, how do I think about technology which is either built for a consumer or built for an enterprise? And I'm neither. And so you really need to have the appropriate technology relative to scale. Now, here's the real benefit that's happened in the industry is really the entry point for people to go and build technology has come dramatically down because of all these distributed services. And now it's become a lot easier, which is why you're seeing such a big push into what I would call consumer-grade technology built for business. And then I think the key then is all about how do you think about the staffing constraints, right? Whether it's time, resources needed to go and actually not just implement the solution, but then essentially get it up and running and have it properly supported. Is there support there to help you as you bring this to fruition and start to benefit from some of these efficiencies? So look, the report really hit on so many of the things that I live constantly, and I shared it with my COO and co-founder, and so for us resonated a lot. So what's the key takeaway that I have from that is productivity is really key, and so whatever solutions are out there, this is what needs to be hit at, because everything needs to drive better collaboration, and it also needs to be in a way that it has a better distributed and accessibility across the different teams within your company.
Yeah. You mentioned a couple of the deterrents or the headwinds, right? So having the right budget to be able to invest in these things, having the time to put toward it. Are there any other deterrents that you see when it comes to any type of digital investment or digital implementation at these companies?
I think very quickly people are looking at sort of how quickly do I get a return on the investment. I think it's, in today's sort of economic environment, I think it's even more key that people see the rapid return on putting that, because it's always competing, right? As I said, we are hyper constrained typically on the resources that we have, because we don't have, bigger companies have the ability to go and cut back in big areas and create capacity. And that's not the case in the middle market, right? You don't have that as an option. And so for us, it's really about how quickly can we access a tool? How quickly can we then deploy it across the teams and really start to see the benefits of that digital side of payments? And that's partly why we're in this space of payments and credit cards. It's a fantastic space because they fulfill a function of a payment, but they also play a critical role in working capital. And that's one of the biggest things that I took away from the report was also just how much can actually go on a credit card. And the report highlights that nearly 2/3 of all expenses. So what did I do? I went straight to my CFO and went, so help me understand, outside of salaries and rent, how much do we as a company, right, who are in this space, put actually on the digital forms of payment like credit cards? And it turns out, surprisingly enough, that we do actually put 2/3 of our payments on credit cards, whether they're digital or physical. So it's very real what comes out of this report. And again, maybe we're on the sort of frontier of this, partly because we're in this space, but we see just tremendous value in that working capital benefit that we get from it, but also from the efficiencies we're getting by having employees not having to go and submit their reports or ask for cash back on cash that they put up front. So again, a lot of that is where we're seeing efficiencies in the process.
Right. So Edward, you mentioned earlier, some of the changes that'll be taking place across these companies in terms of leadership transition and just becoming kind of younger, so to speak. What are some of the other evolutions that you might see over the next couple of years as we think about emerging middle market companies?
Yeah, I think so. I think another key one that I think the study brought up is that they continue to fuel growth through investment in digital solutions, right? So today, I think the investment in IT is something like 24%, training development 20%, facilities 19%. So I think we'll continue to see more of that. I think when it comes to payments, like more than 77% of emerging companies are likely to shift to digital solutions embedded in their ERP or accounting software, enhancing transparency and automating accounting processes. So I think so first and foremost, there's the digital experience that the user has with technology, but then there's a big push to drive more integration of these systems into ERPs or payment modes into ERPs or other internal systems as well. So I think we'll continue to see more of that as we go into the future.
Yep. And Andrew, you mentioned, you sit in this space. What about Xtend? How do you see your company evolving over the next couple of years as you continue to grow?
Look, one of the things that we dive deep on is really around, as I think I mentioned it, a little bit of this collaboration, right? How do you get better collaboration at attainable price points? I keep looking at tools like Figma, which are taking off really fast, versus Photoshop. I look at Google versus Word, right? And you start thinking the reason why Figma, Google are growing so fast is they're very self-service. You have a per seat license, right? And it's really about sort of driving that. And so my view around how this evolves and why I'm excited about where this sort of middle market piece goes, specifically around payments, is because I think we are actually providing tools that will drive productivity and time savings that actually end up delivering a much better customer experience, because so much of it goes back to this. It's collaborative, it's self-serve, it's easy to deploy. And actually for a lot of the companies that we work with, it creates a competitive advantage for them because they start to embed, right, these digital forms of payment into an end-to-end process or workflow that has them trying to reconcile, potentially a court filing fee that they went and did for a client with actually the settlement on the back end, and they can rebuild that client instantly. Or maybe they're running a software platform, right, that is optimizing your shipping costs from point A to point B, and essentially they go across all the different providers, identify one, and then they use a digital credit card to make the settlement and rebuild the client. So much of it is in that space. And again, as I mentioned before, these access to these different APIs and to these different digital layers is really creating tremendous opportunities for these businesses to gain the efficiencies that will then allow them to continue to invest in other areas.
Yep, absolutely.
Can I add something to that?
Just please.
Kind of a parallel point, I guess. But what was really, for me, palpable in the report is always like a lot of these companies do not have a clear digital innovation plan, right? So I think when you think of as to how they will evolve going into the future, I think a lot of these emerging middle market companies are so focused on their business today and trying to drive innovation and trying to build new products that they need help and support as they think about that plan, digital innovation plan for the future. Okay, so I think that's a key point that we as providers and service providers to these companies need to think about. They need help, right? I think we need to be at the ready to help them think through what the future will look like as they continue to grow their businesses, in the fast way they actually do it today.
Yeah, that's a great segue, Edward, into a question I actually have for both of you. So as we've been studying the middle market, a lot of these companies, but I think this is even a bigger issue in the emerging middle market, tell us about their skills gap issue. So talent. We talk about the technology, certainly the productivity and the time, but what type of effect does this have on the people that work in these companies, right? So making sure that they have the right training, they have the right capabilities, they have the right skill sets to be able to effectively use these types of tools. Can you both comment on that somewhat?
Yeah, I guess one view is that I think the service providers need to, as we bring technology and services to these companies, we need to layer in and help them better integrate, implement, bring to market, execute these technologies and solutions. We just can't just drop them in. Yep. We need to help our customers realize the full value with adequate implementation, training, ongoing support post implementation. Right, and I think that's an iterative cycle. We listen, we hear, we implement, we deliver. We listen, we hear, we implement, deliver again. That's kind of my view on it, and it also helps us just be closer to the customer. In my view, Doug.
Yep,
Andrew, what do you think about the talent aspect of all this?
Well, it's interesting. You talk about training and skill sets, and look, this brings me back to my SAP days. Right, it took months to end up training folks to make sure they had the right skill set, that they would even know how to use the platform. And I think that's the big evolution in my mind, is we're moving towards this consumer grade where workflow makes things easy and you're much more focused on self-service and having to rely on someone else to go and do this. So I think that's a big part of this evolution, this movement that is happening right now, which I get really excited about, because I think you remove the need for a lot of this training because it's all about intuition and it's intuitive platforms. Mm-hmm. I think the biggest challenge that people have, though, is they're overwhelmed today, right? And so awareness, I think, is going to be key. Is what are the solutions, and a little bit being able to sort of work your way around some of the smoke and mirrors of how people talk about what they do versus what they actually do. So I think awareness is going to be key. And so the launch of these reports, but then also the announcement that we have with Visa is key, is like aware that these platforms now work, making sure that they get easy access, that it's not, the accessibility of the tool in itself isn't overwhelming. And that's why we've worked really closely with Visa to say, like, let's make it accessible from the existing card you already have in your possession, right? So you don't need to sign up for anything. You don't need to go to anything else. You just have what you have, and you can sign up with the 16 digits on your card and get going with these digital tools. Then, for me, it's all about how do you make sure it's integrated with the tools they already use, right? In this segment, they'll often be using the likes of QuickBooks or Intact, and the upper end, they'll maybe using NetSuite. So make sure it flows back and forth in and out of that tool correctly. And I think like where this is headed is more into the embedded side of things, right? Which is, how is this digitally native to a tool that I'm already using? Because then, to your point, you remove the need for sort of the training and the skills gap that might exist, because it's kind of already in the experience that they're using. And it's happened in the consumer segment. I think it's now finally coming into the business segment, but it's just been that much more complicated because of the software solutions that people use in business are exponentially more complicated than those people use in their day-to-day lives.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So my last question for you both, and I'll start with you, Andrew, which is, emerging middle market companies who read this report, what would be one big takeaway or something you would tell your peers, like, hey, you should really be paying attention to this insight from the report? What do these companies really need to know as they think about what their peers are doing across the emerging middle market?
Look, I think what's really clear is if they're not doing something, they are falling behind. And I look at it across the board, right? I know there's a lot of discussions around AI, and I think, the reality is there's a lot of hype out there, and we haven't seen a lot of the results, but the results are coming, right? I'll give you an example. Is we just went and linked our data into Claude and started asking questions, and it was returning incredibly solid answers, which says, okay, so you don't really need a business intelligence layer anymore because it's going to come through these pipes. So all that to say that there's a lot of tools out there, and so they do need to lean in because I think they are going to see the productivity benefits, and I do think the technology's moved towards them. That gap or vacuum that existed in middle market, because it was kind of the ignored middle child, is now truly being served. So I think the time is ripe for them to do it. I think there's a lot of immediate benefits to be had, not just in automation, but actually in finance and working capital, because digital credit cards, beyond the rewards, right, they do provide the working capital and provide a lot of efficiency on the back end. Not to mention, I think they'll drive higher satisfaction amongst their employees, right? Because they will be supported by tools that they start to recognize that they get the benefits that they've been having in the consumer world. So the time is now, in my mind.
Yeah. Edward, any other tips or advice for emerging middle market leaders that you would add?
Yeah. Again, I go back to this concept, like 43% don't have a clear digital innovation plan. I would spend, as an AMM leader, spend time thinking about a digital innovation plan, what that means for you and your business, in parallel with, working with your financial institution provider on better access to working capital, whether that's through a card or whatever the case may be. I think just continue to push back on your financial institution provider to support better credit underwriting, just getting that capital to help you sustain your business growth. You're in a great business segment. It's growing fast. There's clearly a lot of technology to support you, but build a plan around it and help and continue to get cash to support the needs.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I want to thank you both for making time to speak with us today. I think this has been an awesome conversation, a lot of great insights and points brought up, specifically referring to the EMM report. And again, just want to thank you for chatting with me today.
Thank you, Doug.
Thanks, Doug.
Thanks, Andrew.
For more about Andrew's company, Xtend, you can visit paywithxtend.com and, of course, visa.com for more information about Visa Commercial Solutions. And the report will also be accessible on our website, which is middlemarketcenter.org. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to The Market That Moves America. Never miss a new episode by subscribing anywhere podcasts can be found. You can also subscribe to our email newsletter at middlemarketcenter.org.